is a national crisis. Every state is now a border state, and every border state is wide open. And as President Trump said, if you don't have borders, you don't have a country. Fentanyl seizures have doubled in 2021, and fentanyl is now the leading cause of death of Americans age 18 to 45. Drug overdose deaths climbed to record levels. 2 times as many Americans died of illegal narcotics this year than died during the entire Vietnam War. All of this happened because Secretary Mayorkas opened our border in a matter of months. He didn't do that by sitting on his hands, he did it by breaking the law. Secretary Mayorkas refused to implement President Trump's Remain in Mexico policy after being ordered to do so by a federal court. He defied federal law and unilaterally halted construction of the border wall, costing United States taxpayers $72 million. This is an intentional border crisis. Deportations plummeted while illegal immigration skyrocketed. And that's only possible because Secretary Mayorkas decided not to enforce the law. The DHS Secretary's mission is to ensure, quote, the safety and security of our borders. But today, during one of the worst humanitarian crises in history, Secretary Mayorkas announced he is focusing on fighting disinformation. Today, he announced the DHS's Disinformation Governance Board. While foreigners illegally cross our border at will, Secretary Mayorkas has prioritized policing law-abiding American citizens' speech. But Secretary Mayorkas is worse than neglectful. He's working to undermine his department's mission. He is working to make our border less secure and our country less safe. About 2.5 million illegal border crossings since Joe Biden took office, and a record number of people have died crossing the U.S.-Mexico border in 2021, about 650. Enough is enough. When Republicans take back the House majority in 2022, I vow to you, we will use our oversight power to investigate Secretary Mayorkas' disregard for federal law. And we will expose his criminal conduct, and we will hold him accountable. The American people will thank us when we do. With that, I'd like to turn over the podium to my colleague and friend and co-chair of the Border Security Caucus, Representative Babin.
Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate it. Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Babin, 36th District of Texas. It's a great pleasure to be here, and we appreciate your attention today on this very, very critical issue. President Biden and DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, they have successfully manufactured the worst border disaster in the history of our nation. And now they want to make it worse by rescinding Title 42. The only remaining guardrail keeping our southern border from disappearing completely. Make no mistake, every single decision that they've made, including this one, has been a dangerous and reckless decision, and make no mistake as well, every single one of these decisions were purposeful. They know exactly what they're doing. They're intentional and they're calculated. It's really actually difficult to dismantle a fairly secure border. But in the span of just over a year, the Biden administration has undone every single measure and policy put in place to effectively secure that border. They spout nonsense about how they inherited a mess and this and that from the Trump administration. But that is an absolute lie and falsehood, and no matter how many times it is repeated, it will remain a falsehood and a lie. Whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, you know with absolute certainty that we had the most secure border that we've ever had under the previous administration of Donald Trump. And because, unlike Democrats, the numbers don't lie. And just last year, we had more than 2.5 million illegal aliens show up at our southern border. But trust me, folks, It's about to get much worse. And here's the reality. Title 42, it matters only so long as this administration enforces it and utilizes it as the tool necessary. We saw this same song and dance with the Remain in Mexico program, better known as MPP. The Biden administration ended that. The courts told them to reinstate it, a federal court order. But now we see it back in place in name only, not in practice. We know that Title 42 faces the same future should Biden choose to extend it. Go by what they do, not by what they say. And don't be fooled by these Democrats who are now publicly calling for Title 42 to remain in place. We know they have zero interest in protecting the border and protecting my home state of Texas or to protect our nation, or they would have spoken up months ago. No, they're interested in protecting their seats in Congress. And friends, we've sacrificed enough. We were forced to shut down while our border was wide open to thousands who had active COVID disease. We have had our schools packed and overrun without any say from the taxpayers that foot the bill. We've had our property destroyed and vandalized. We have lost loved ones at both the hands of illegal aliens and the deadly drugs that many of them have smuggled in. Over 100,000 Americans dead last year from drug overdoses, most of which had come across the southern border. And now we have lost a soldier, a Texas Army National Guard, guardsman. I am a former Texas Army National Guardsman myself, and that's why it really irks me to hear what I heard Jen Psaki say. This young man, age 22, who died trying to save a drowning illegal border crosser, whom we now believe were smuggling drugs into the country. I could not believe the words coming out of Jen Psaki's mouth earlier this week. How dare she blame the death of Texas National Guard Specialist Bishop Evans on Governor Abbott and on the great state of Texas. How dare she and the president abandon our brothers and sisters in uniform like that. Those guardsmen are stationed on the border because the Biden and Mayorkas team refused to do their job. Another life lost because of Biden's decisions, and they just don't seem to care. She and the president can keep their insincere sympathies. They can keep their hearts going out to this family, as she said. Those are hollow words from the mouths of the very people directly responsible for this guardsman's death. I'm not one for hyperbole, but the Democrats are truly destroying our safety and our sovereignty. Why? Two reasons: the maintenance of political power, and as Obama said earlier, to fundamentally transform the United States of America. And with that, I will turn the mic over to my friend and our Minority Whip, Steve Scalise.
Thank you, Brian, and thank Chairman Banks for what they're doing through RSC to lead on this issue. America's border is under siege. And if you look at what President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas have done, they have turned operational control of America's border over to drug cartels who are trafficking people into our country every day, making billions of dollars to fuel their drug trade, and they've also created a pipeline to bring in deadly drugs like fentanyl that are killing people all across America. Every town is now a border town because every community in America is negatively affected by President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas' failure to secure our southern border. As have been pointed out by Jim Banks and others, over 100,000 young people died last year from fentanyl overdoses, primarily coming from China through the southern border because President Biden won't do his job in securing our border. When you hear these numbers, nearly 2.5 million people that have come here illegally, that's the size of the city of Houston, Texas, the fourth largest city in America. That's how many people that we know of have come across illegally. There are also hundreds of thousands of people who never got apprehended. There are dozens of people that we've caught that are on the terrorist watch list who have come into our country illegally. And when you think about what's going on all around the world, we're not just talking about people coming from South and Central America. There's over dozens of countries that are included in that number of people that are coming here illegally, including from Middle Eastern countries. You know, when you've got the Taliban that President Biden turned over to a terrorist organization in Afghanistan, when you look at what's happening in Ukraine with Russia moving in, with China looking to move, there are threats all around the world. The last thing we need to do is have an unsecured border. We need to secure America. From our border, we need energy security. We need a lot of security, but it starts with homeland security. And that's where Secretary Mayorkas has failed the American people. We're going to continue demanding answers and demanding that he do his job in securing the border. But in the meantime, if you look at what Title IV provides to our country as a defense mechanism, it's not just about COVID. Think about the fentanyl, one of the most deadly drugs. And again, you go through any community in America and you ask families if they know somebody who's died from fentanyl overdose. Sadly, you'll probably get everyone tell you they know somebody who's died because of fentanyl. It's come through the open southern border that President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas has allowed to happen. Now, thank goodness for at least now, a federal judge just the other day in Louisiana blocked President Biden's attempt to drop Title 42, but he's not done. He's going to keep trying, and by trying to drop Title 42, he makes America less secure. When you look at these numbers, this is something we're going to continue to highlight. We're going to continue to fight to secure America's border and to save more lives. I talked to a rancher just the other day. I was in Texas earlier this week. I talked to a rancher who's had over a dozen dead bodies on his property because of the human trafficking that's coming across. That's just one person's property on the border. It's happening all over our border. It's a national disgrace that is completely preventable, and it was completely created when President Biden decided that he wanted to open the border by getting rid of Remain in Mexico, by getting rid of the Northern Triangle agreements, by stopping construction of the wall that President Trump had built to secure our border. It was done before. We're going to continue fighting to ensure that we get back to a secure border. And with that, now I'm going to bring up my colleague from Florida, Kat Kamick.
Well, thank you to my my friend and colleague, Representative and Minority Whip Steve Scalise, and to Congressman Banks for leading this here today. I know we've all talked about how every town in America is a border town, and it is here today that I want to point out that this is not just a talking point. You'll hear this from every member, but this is actually something very real. 10 days ago, this brick of fentanyl was found in my district in Marion County, Florida. This is 900 grams of pure fentanyl. If you look closely, you will see a stamp. That is the stamp of a border cartel that has been identified by Homeland Security investigations. Along with that was a pill press, weapons, and additional cash. What was happening was they were taking this brick of fentanyl, creating a new drug, pill pressing it, and then using my district as a testing ground for this new drug. My husband, last week, responded in one night, one shift, to 3 calls. He is a firefighter and a SWAT medic, and in his experience, he sees this all the time, but last week, in one shift, one night, 3 calls, 3 overdoses, 2 didn't make it. It was fentanyl. This isn't just a talking point. This is real. And it's happening in every county, every municipality, and every state in America. No one is immune to this. Today, I had the opportunity to question Secretary Mayorkas. I submitted for the record a letter led by our colleagues on the Republican Study Committee, 133 to be exact. And within that letter, there were questions, very pointed questions about border security and Title 42 and what his department and his administration was going to do. He committed to me a yes, verbal yes, that he will respond to each one of those questions in 30 days. I'm asking you here today, as members of the media, to help us hold him accountable because he verbally committed to that. But I also asked him, yes or no, do you believe that we are a nation of laws? He said yes. I said, if someone crosses the border illegally, do you think that we have the right to arrest and then deport that individual for breaking the law? He said yes. Representative Babin mentioned here today that we should judge them by their actions, not by their words. It's clear that the actions and the words aren't matching up. Because if they were serious about border security, if they were serious about homeland security, if they were serious about getting drugs like this off of our streets, they would actually secure our border. They wouldn't be changing the definitions and the statutes within MPP. They would not be getting rid of Title 42, the last tool in the toolbox that our Border Patrol agents have. So when you hear members talk about every town in America as a border town, think of Marion County, Florida. Think about how this is the third time that we have found a brick of fentanyl that is over 800 grams. Think about the families that have been destroyed, and think about how many families are potentially going to be destroyed by this. And with that, I have the great pleasure of yielding to my friend and colleague, the Mayor of West Texas, Representative Arrington.
I've got another question I'd like to ask the President. How could you fail on your most sacred responsibility to provide for a common defense and keep the American people safe and secure? The people of Texas have been abandoned by this president and their government. I want to thank Chairman Banks and Dr. Babin and Whip Scalise and my colleagues here today for their leadership on what I believe is the most imminent threat to the safety and security of the American people. For over a year, we've been experiencing this unprecedented and unmitigated humanitarian and security crisis. But at the heart of this self-inflicted disaster is a constitutional crisis. The same Constitution that Secretary Mayorkas took an oath to defend. This administration is completely failing to uphold its core constitutional responsibilities. And I repeat, to provide for a common defense, to protect Americans against an invasion, Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, and to enforce the laws of the land. Homeland Security's own mission statement says, the administration and enforcement of our nation's immigration laws is critically important to the national security and public safety of the United States. I think I can speak for my colleagues when I say we couldn't agree more. But this administration is not only failing to fulfill their own mission, they are failing to defend the Constitution and uphold the laws of this great country. They're not detaining people who are here illegally. They're not enforcing expedited removal. They're not following the court order to enforce MPP. They're not executing on Congress's directive to build the wall. They're not maintaining operational control of the border. Mr. Secretary, preserve the integrity of your office. Faithfully execute our immigration laws and fulfill your sacred duty to secure the border, stop illegal immigration, and keep your citizens, our fellow Americans, safe. And with that, I turn the mic over to my dear friend and neighbor in eastern New Mexico, fellow freedom fighter, Yvette Harold.
That's great. Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Scalise and Banks, Congressman Banks. I'm just honored to be here to talk about this today because it is so important. I mean, today, Secretary Mayorkas testified before Congress that we will not lose operational control of the border. Well, it's kind of hard to lose something that you don't have. So today he also said that it shows that he's completely out of touch with the American people. His radical political appointees are purposely destroying our nation's border security and allowing people, drugs, and terrorists to flow unabated into our great nation. At one point today, Secretary Mayorkas claimed the U.S. has effectively managed the ongoing migration crisis. Well, the truth is we're not talking about birds here. We're not talking about migration patterns. We're talking about American citizens. And you've heard from my colleagues how dangerous this is. If it's so effective, then why are over 2 million people making it to our southern border illegally and coming into our land? Why are we concerned about the uptick in fentanyl? The border crisis is real. The communities that live in and around, the people that live in and around the border are feeling it. And everybody's correct here. Every state's a border state, but you don't have to take my word for it. You can go down to Hachita on your own, talk to Judy Keeler about the bust that was done today in her front yard. There were over 18 illegals there, a pregnant woman holding onto a 1-year-old with a 3-year-old by her side with a group of men. This is a real threat to our sovereignty as a nation. And really, the problem is Secretary Mayorkas would like to blame the surge in migration under Joe Biden's watch from everything to COVID to climate change, when in fact, really, the true cause is a lack of enforcement, a lack of leadership, and possibly he does not understand his job description. Perhaps America first doesn't mean anything to him. And perhaps the American people need to continue to put pressure on every one of the people in this administration who have decided that America last feels pretty good to them. But the cavalry is coming in November. I guarantee you we have been listening to the American people for the last year. And it breaks my heart to think that now we have actually 26 governors from around the country that are putting together a task force, a strike force actually, because of the failed policy and failed leadership of this administration. And I'll tell you, it's a pretty sad day. I went down to the border on Good Friday. Yeah, in New Mexico, I did run into some National Guard troops. I thanked them for their service and then I asked them where they were from. They were all from the state of Florida. You know why? Because a lot of these governors get it, and they want to protect America. And that's exactly what Mayorkas should be doing instead of worrying about climate change or COVID change or, I don't know, maybe what he's having for dinner. This is a real issue. We need to stand up. We need to have our voices heard, and this administration needs to take the accountability and the steps forward to protect our sovereignty. And with that, I would like to turn it over to my friend Michael Cloud.
Michael Cloud from Texas 27th District. We keep hearing this word, effectively manage. The Biden administration said they effectively managed the withdrawal from Afghanistan. They effectively managed COVID, and today we hear Secretary Mayorkas saying he's effectively managed the border. Reminds me of a quote from an old movie that says, "You keep using that word, I don't think it means what you think it means." It's sad to see that this administration continues to embrace these sort of principles. If effectively managing means that we're aiding and abetting cartels, that's exactly what's happening. We've effectively aided and abetted cartels. We've effectively invited terrorists into our country. We effectively, I live in South Texas, and so I've visited the facilities where young women are there, and half of which will admit they've been abused along the journey. I talk to ranchers weekly whose fences are run over, who find dead bodies on their property, who are afraid to let their children roam their own property because of what they may come across. They find rape trees on their property. This is not an effectively managed border at all. Just this last week, we had a Texas National Guard member, Bishop Evans, thinking he was saving the life of a migrant coming across the border, and now we understand that it was most likely a couple cartel members bringing drugs into our country. And so under the Trump administration, we had actually seen a decline for the first time in many years of drug overdoses. Well, that has stopped, and now we are effectively seeing an increase of drugs. And as been mentioned, fentanyl is the #1 killer for young people in our country today. This is tragic, and my district is what in an area of Texas where law enforcement calls it the fatal funnel. There's a couple major highways that go through Houston, and so we see this on a daily basis. We see the effects of the border throughout our communities. Many of our communities are left to deal with, as now many communities across our nation. What to do with the schools, what to do with hospitals, what to do with the burden from what's happening at our borders from having an open border. Secretary Mayorkas has not done what he's supposed to do to secure the border. The way this is supposed to work, of course, as we know in a republic, is that we pass the laws and the administration, the executive branch, faithfully executes the laws that they've sworn to do. Well, they are not doing that. They are not executing the laws when it comes to safe third country. I visited a border patrol and I asked them how that was going. I said, well, there's been a court order. You've been told to reinstate this. Have you gotten a memo? Have you gotten anything? It was a reflexive laugh at the response that they've gotten from this administration when it comes to how they are now enforcing safe third country. And when it comes to what's going on in deportation laws, what they're supposed to be doing, we have increased funding, yet less activity going on. And of course, we come to the wall and the infrastructure that's supposed to be securing at the border. Congress has already funded it. The American people have already paid for the infrastructure necessary to help secure our border, and this administration refuses to do so, and indeed is taking the hard-earned wealth of the American people and using it to not build the infrastructure necessary to secure our border. And so this is tragic. It's tragic that we have to continue to talk about this, but we will continue to be talking about it. And it has said, if not before November, certainly thereafter, we will see action on this, and the investigations will roll out, and we will bring this administration to justice and to account. And with that, I yield to my friend and colleague and neighbor from Texas, Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Mr. McLeod. Today, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas had the audacity to tell members of Congress, under oath, I remind you, that the department has, quote, as Mr. McLeod said, effectively managed the flow of migrants on our southern border. Well, I'm going to echo what my colleague said. His definition of effectively managed, well, to me it says that his education might not have been effectively managed. That's what it says to me. Well, Secretary Mayorkas, I was just there on Monday, and as someone who served in the Texas House of Representatives from 2009 to 2012 and was on the Border Committee during that time, this is the worst I've ever seen a border effectively managed. Since President Biden assumed office and ratcheted up his open border and amnesty rhetoric, hung out the sign that said, "Come one, come all, you're welcome," we have seen unprecedented surges of illegals across the border. Quite frankly, at the rate Mayorkas is not doing his job, we don't need him on the border or anywhere else for that matter. We are looking at over 6,000 illegal crossers a day, and if Title 42 is lifted, we can expect 16 to 18,000 illegal crossers a day. Are we a sovereign nation with borders? Apparently they don't think so. Apparently they think it doesn't matter if we have borders or not. Apparently they don't care about the American public. That's the administration that we have. We lost a soldier. I was there with Kevin McCarthy and about 8 other members when they discovered his body in the river. President Biden and Mayorkas, in my opinion, bear responsibility for that death. And we see little ones that have died. All the bodies that Congressman McLeod talked about. We see that all over the border. Between the desire to repeal Title 42 and the reversal of the Remain in Mexico policy and Mayorkas' dishonest testimony today, this administration has proven that they don't care if America is a sovereign nation, and they don't care about sovereign borders. They don't care about the American people, and quite frankly, they don't care about their oath of office, in my opinion. They care about one thing, maybe two: money and power. That's what they care about. They believe illegal migrants, when granted amnesty, will create a giant voting bloc, keeping limousine liberals perpetually in office. Their obsession with ideological open border policies have put women, children, families, law enforcement, soldiers that we saw, and now our national security at risk. Secretary Mayorkas' failure to secure the border and enforce the laws passed by Congress, combined with his testimony today before Congress, raises serious questions about his commitment to his oath of office and his suitability for office. Mayorkas needs to be removed from office, and this administration needs to take immediate action to protect our citizens and this nation. America, wake up. I think you are. The Democrats are going to find in November that Americans have had enough. It's time to put America first. I yield back.
I want to thank all of my colleagues for their important comments on this matter, and happy to take a few questions.
I spoke with Representative Escobar today, and she's saying y'all are using Title 42 as political theater. And she's saying that it's actually inflating the border crossing numbers, and that you're using it to push xenophobia. What is your response to Representative Escobar?
It's obviously laughable for her to make those claims. The fact that she is not willing to take any responsibility or show any leadership at all to address the issues at the border is what the American people have had enough of, and the election is going to show it. It's going to prove it. Yes.
You had another one of your colleagues today hold a presser calling for a comprehensive immigration reform package. I mean, this is something that Congress got so close to doing back in 2013. Is there any momentum to have a similar package either be worked on now or perhaps next year when Republicans might be the majority?
Well, there are so many issues to deal with immigration. I'll defer to my colleagues on this, but first and foremost, I appreciate that Leader McCarthy has made a commitment that when he's the speaker, there will not be any single bill that passes out of the House that offers amnesty. And I, as Republican Study Committee Chairman, as a conservative leader in the House, I applaud his leadership in making that commitment. That being said, there are many issues related to immigration that are worth discussing and resolving, but it's got to start with securing the border. And we have a secretary right now in Mayorkas who has ignored legal orders to do his job, and he has 30 days to respond to our letters. As Representative Kamak forced him to do, he agreed that he will respond verbally before the committee today within the next 30 days. Otherwise, there are a lot of major issues here that deserve the American people's attention, deserve Congress's attention, and Republicans are going to do everything to hold him accountable. I don't know if Whip Scalise or anyone else want to.
Later this year, we're going to be rolling out the Republicans' commitment to America, and it's going to show the country on a whole host of crises that are facing the nation, from the border crisis, inflation crisis, high gas prices, national security. If you look at the issue of parents being involved in their kids' education, runaway crime in big cities, we're going to be rolling out an agenda on all of those different fronts. And I can tell you, there are a lot of issues both with the border and interior security, but it all starts with border security. And I think you're going to see a package that we will roll out early off in a Republican majority that would show the country how to secure America's border. Now, be up to President Biden to talk about whether he would support that or not. It'd be up to the Senate to move it too, but I think you'd see a lot of Republicans from all swaths of our conference coming together to pass a border security package. There are a lot of other issues too regarding immigration that then we could see if we could get a consensus on, but it starts with border security, and we will be having that as a main component of our commitment to America.
Can I ask a really quick follow-up just in terms of making sure that things mean what you say they mean? Can you define amnesty a little bit more? Because there have been proposals that, some people say it's amnesty, other people is like, no, we're asking immigrants to pay their fair share.
Amnesty is clearly rewarding those who come here illegally and granting them permanent legal status or citizenship of some sort. So I stand against that, and I believe most Republicans in the Republican conference stand against that, and I appreciate that our leader, Kevin McCarthy, has made a commitment that when he's speaker, no bill that includes amnesty will pass out of the House of Representatives. Yes?
I have a question for you and then for one of your colleagues. For you, what does it tell you that this isn't a black and white, Democrats on one side, Republicans on the other? There are Democrats who are on the same side. What does that tell you about this issue?
Well, I think that's being generous. I mean, at this point, there are a few Democrats that are willing to step up and demand that this administration secure the border, return back to the Remain in Mexico policies and the policies that worked under President Trump to secure the border. There might be a few that are restless or anxious about lifting Title 42. They know that that's going to make the crisis that we already have a whole lot worse. So I appreciate that there are a few Democrats perhaps who are willing to say that, but this is a black and white issue to the American people, and they've had enough. They see it for what it is. They know this administration has created this crisis, and they know Secretary Mayorkas is ignoring the rule of law, and he's making it a lot worse. So the letter the Republican Study Committee led, 133 members signed it, demanding answers from the Secretary, is something that shows broad unity within the Republican conference, and I think you can stay tuned to what comes next after we see the results.
And a follow-up for Whip Scalise. I wonder if we can talk briefly about a meeting that you had earlier today with Congressman Gates. He says he's going to go on Fox News and talk about it, so I wanted to see if you had anything to say about it, and if you stand by your initial comments in that now public audio about how his comments might have been veering towards the potentially illegal.
As I shared with Matt when we talked today, there were some things that were being told to a number of us that were in that call about threats that were being made, and there were members that were getting death threats at the time. And clearly, I'm very alarmed and a little bit extra concerned when you see members of Congress, Republican or Democrat, getting death threats, and so wanting to ratchet down the rhetoric that's out there. And there were some things that were being presented to us in that meeting by others that raised those concerns that I expressed. Now, clearly, those didn't ultimately come to fruition because there were no charges that were brought, but what we were being told were some pretty alarming things, some from law enforcement, some from other members. And so I shared that with Matt. I'm sorry that those comments caused him problems because it was things that was conveyed to me from a number of places that we were, and look, you can go back to those days after January 6th. There were a lot of reports floating around. Some turned out to be true, some not. And so, as you're having private conversations commenting on those things, ultimately, the concerns I had were that there were members getting death threats. And that was something that I surely wanted to be vocal at pushing back on, but he and I talked about that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to confirm, because you guys talked about it obviously with the larger group during your meeting this morning, but then you guys met separately, just one-on-one, right?
Yeah, we did.
Thank you. Yes.
So Secretary Mayorkas has been saying that his hands are tied when it comes to Title 42 because of the CDC's directive. What's your reaction to that, and do you have any plans to go after the CDC or HHS on their guidance on this issue?
I'll defer to Dr. Babin.
Thank you. He, as one of the co-chairs of the House Border Security Caucus, we had Secretary Mayorkas come and sit down with about 30 or 40 of us, and he tried to tell us that he had no jurisdiction on whether this thing would continue or discontinue. But he is the secretary appointed by the president for the Department of Homeland Security, and absolutely he can make recommendations. And those recommendations, he doesn't sit on the CDC. I understand that, but it is absolutely disingenuous for him to sit there and tell the Border Security Caucus and the Judiciary Committee and anybody else that he has no say over Title 42. It is just simply not the case. If the man is the Secretary over Homeland Security, and this is a tool that he has at his disposal to use to keep the homeland secure and safe and keep Americans safe, he absolutely could make the recommendation, and it would carry a lot of weight with this administration. So I want to say thanks to Chairman Banks of the RSC. I want to say thanks to my colleagues, to Whip Scalise, for letting us, for getting this initiative up so that we can start talking about a man who is sitting in a position and simply not doing the job, ignoring his oath of office, and telling whoppers exactly as you just said. Thank you.
Thank you. We will hold Secretary Mayorkas and the Biden administration accountable. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
You walked in with that dog and I take my eyes off.
Oh, okay. I feel like I'm responding. I know.
So, my question.
I mean, it's so distracting. when you walk in.
We'll get there tomorrow. We'll get there tomorrow.